Children's Services.
Thank you and welcome. So, item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. It was held on the 16th of April 2018. We have one panel member. Can you approve? Yeah. Thank you. Interests, item 3. If councillors have any interest, if they can fill out the relevant paperwork and hand it in after the meeting. 4, admission of the public. There are no items on this agenda to be taken in private, and we have an informal meeting after this one. The main item, item 5, is the draft sufficiency strategy. This is for members of the committee to consider and comment on the content of the report and the draft Children's Interim Sufficiency Strategy and Action Plan. Is it Steve? You can take us through the report.
Hi. The purpose of the report is that members of the Scrutiny panel note the content of the report in the draft Children's Interim Sufficiency Strategy and Action Plan for 2018 to 2019, which is in Appendices 1, and to ask Scrutiny to comment on the draft Strategy and Action Plan to contribute towards its further development. As part of our improvement plan, we are committed to producing a sufficiency strategy and action plan setting out how we will increase the availability of local placements to ensure that our children and young people in care do not need to be placed at a distance from their community. This draft interim strategy and action plan sets out our approach until the end of the calendar year 2019. Its key outcomes are children feeling confident and our decisions more clearly reflect their needs and views. More children and young people should be able to stay at home and also leave care early, and more placements of the right kind for children and young people in need, especially in family setting placements, so particularly looking at fostering placements, whilst recognising that there is a need for specialist residential accommodation as well. By increasing placement stability, increase the number of foster placements, reserving specialist residential placements for those that need them the most, we believe we will see less of our children and young people placed outside of the district where appropriate. Ofsted recommended Kirklees increases the availability of local placements to ensure that children and young people do not need to be placed at a distance from their community. This continues to be a challenge as the number of children in care nationally has continued to rise. In the improvement plan, we committed to deliver the outcome through a sufficiency strategy and action plan, which is what we present in the draft of today. The Council has a statutory duty to take steps to provide sufficient accommodation within the district to meet the needs of our local children and young people as far as reasonably practical. That's the Children Act 1989, so there's a legal duty to do this. This draft strategy is produced with the Government's guidance in mind. Government guidance is securing sufficient accommodation for looked after children. We also considered other documents. There's a document by Ofsted which is called Children Placed at a Distance, which talks about the challenges when children are placed at a distance from their own community. The draft strategy has had significant contributions from teams across the Council, including the Children's Rights Team, Corporate Parenting, Commissioning, Corporate Strategy and Policy Team, Joint Commissioning from the CCG, healthcare professionals, the Care Leavers Forum. So we've consulted quite widely on this draft. Consultees on page 4, you can see expressed a number of opinions, and we have taken those opinions into account in terms of moving on to our action plan. In the draft strategy document, you can see on page 3, our shared vision is developed with partners in the private, public and voluntary sector, and it's for Kirklees to have both a strong, sustainable economy, a great quality of life, leading to thriving communities, growing businesses, high prosperity and low inequality, where people enjoy better health throughout their lives. We are working with our partners to lead the district in being progressive and responsible, whilst ensuring that everyone benefits from our joint work. If we go through to page 7 of the draft strategy, you can see at the base there when we met with at the bottom of page 7, we met with our children and young people, care leavers and younger children to ask their views, what they thought. And what they said is we need to make sure we listen to them to get their views on placements, about where we place in them. And care leavers said they want to feel more comfortable in the placement so they can feel at home. They specifically mentioned that when they're leaving care, in terms of availability of accommodation, that they would like accommodation to be in districts where there wasn't so much social economic challenge, because they felt as a care leaver, if they were placed in a certain district where there was already a lot of challenges, that was overlaying the challenges that they already faced. They also mentioned there needs to be more attention to care plans and pathway plans for care leavers, and that, in their words, kids in care and care leavers don't always know what social workers expect of them. So young people made some interesting comments. It's certainly worthwhile speaking to them about this draft strategy. Other key factors within the draft, at page 11, at the final paragraphs in page 11, talk about us considering education needs in making placement decisions. So for all of our children and young people in care, we need to make sure they're going into the right school in the right place, and if it has to be a placement move, we need to try and do everything we can to make sure they can remain within the same placement. Some of our children in care have got disabilities, complex emotional, behavioural and social needs. We have the Kirklees virtual school who we work with to monitor all those factors, and also SENACT for children with high additional needs. So this strategy touches on all these areas. Sufficiency is about getting the right placement in the right place at the right time for our children and young people. We've set out a number of actions. We go on page 12 of the draft strategy. We talk about reviewing our commissioning practices, looking at regional and sub-regional collaboration, working with other authorities to get best value and find the right placements for our children and young people. Where necessary, either block purchase or spot purchase, and we will also review our current placement service. So we have a team at the moment who are involved in placements both with internal provision and external provision, and we're currently conducting a review of what that team does and how that team works and how that team is line managed to ensure we develop to be an efficient, effective team as possible. In terms of page 13, we talk about the next steps. By late 2018, we think we'll have much better intelligence about our current and future cohort of young people. We're doing a lot of data analysis, and as we improve our service overall, we feel we'll be in a much better position to develop our 5-year sufficiency plan and strategy, and also a commissioning plan and a market position statement. So there's a lot to do. We go on to the draft action plan. You can see within there we've still got elements where we needing to input things, but we thought this was an important document to bring to Overview and Scrutiny. We know Overview and Scrutiny have had a keen interest in what's happening in children's provisions with visits to children's homes earlier in the year, and we'd like to develop that further so there's a real shared understanding of the challenges we face, and hopefully to work together in developing our strategy as we move forward. I don't know if there's any questions.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions or comments from panel members?
Thank you. quite a few things that came to mind after I read the report. I'm new to Scrutiny, but I'm not new to children's services. So the first thing that I came away with was the numbers are all over the place on this report, and I don't think that it gives me focus. When we're looking at this, we're looking at outcomes, we're looking at how successful all this is, and I don't think there's focus in this strategy. I think the numbers are scattered, and I think there needs to be some sort of table or whatever way it's presented, because we are going to be looking at this in months, years to come, and we need to know how successful these new approaches will be. The other thing is that as long as I've been here, we've been talking about increasing foster places. It's huge, it's a big part of this. I don't get out of this report how that's going to be developed, which is key to how this works. So I think those are probably my first two openers on this. I've got other things as well, but I'll let other people speak, but I'd be interested to hear your views on those.
Yeah.
Okay?
I think in terms of developing local foster care provision, all research would show that the best way to develop local foster care provision is to ensure that the service you provide to your existing foster carers, is a good service. And we're already doing some work around that. We had I had a meeting with myself, Steve Walker and a group of foster carers about 3 months ago, and last week we had the first of our foster carer business meetings, which was down at Mayfield, where we met with 30 foster carers, with the service manager from fostering and also one of the team managers, to develop a relationship with foster carers about what they feel we're doing right and what we need to improve. And we've set up further meetings within this year. We've got a further one in September and a further one in November. And certainly I would welcome at one of those future meetings, if there's a member of Scrutiny that would like to come to one of those meetings, we would welcome that. Because I think developing that relationship, research with foster carers and foster care recruitment shows that most people who become foster carers, it's by either somebody recommended them or they heard about fostering and they heard it was good and enjoyable and they got something back from it. So in terms of the meeting we had with foster carers last week, certainly we had positive feedback immediately that as managers we were meeting with them and listening to them about their issues. I do agree with you that we need more local foster carers, and the pitch we'll be making in terms of recruiting foster carers is that many local authority foster carers, when you talk to them, certainly wherever I've worked, they foster for a local authority rather than a private agency because they don't want to foster for a profit-making organisation. Yeah. And when we spoke with foster carers last week, the 30 foster carers we had there, that came across quite strongly. So that's a strand that we're going to be using and getting our current foster carers on board. I do agree with you. We need more local foster carers to develop placement choice. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. 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 Yeah, I think the challenge around foster care is a national one, and I say that having worked in 5 local authorities. And when I talk about the current foster care as being important, there's 2 strands. One is retention, and the other is recruitment. Yeah, and developing networks with experienced carers. So when you get new carers coming on board, they feel supported. I agree with you, we need more foster carers. Do we have conversations with other local authorities? Yes, we do. Do other local authorities have lots of foster care placements that they're not using? That's not my personal experience. I think the challenge is a national one around foster care, and there was a report, I think it was last year, Sir Martin Mary, around the national challenge around foster care. I do accept what you're saying. We need to do more around recruitment, retention of foster carers, and I think part of our improvement journey, because when you speak to foster carers, in terms of us recruiting and retaining foster carers, how they feel they're supported, how they're dealt with by social workers, how they feel the children in their care, the service they get from the social work teams, etc. It's something in the round, but certainly, I mean, I welcome, you know, your challenge around recruitment and retaining foster carers, and I think we put within this report we are going to do some work with some students as well, just to bring in a bit of innovation about what we're doing and a bit of challenge that way in terms of our recruitment and retention of foster carers. And there's more we can do, certainly more we can do. We're currently looking at we've got a new service manager fostering in post. We are looking at the pathways from that first phone call. So when people contact us, how long does it take us to respond? How long does it take to get them through, you know, to get prospective carers through the system? But I accept your challenge wholeheartedly. Yeah, we need more local foster carers. In terms, yeah, I think it's a common. I mean, it's a common challenge in many local authorities, the need for more foster carers. But it's a multifaceted approach that brings the improvement, and having been involved elsewhere in similar approach, I mean, it's multifaceted. In terms of the data, yeah, we can sharpen up the data if, you know, we can put the data in the various formats.
Okay. Do you want to just press your button? Thank you for that. I think Scrutiny did some work, I think it was 2 years ago, around fostering and understanding, realising that the issue is not isolated just to Kirklees, but everywhere. All local authorities have an issue. I don't think there are any who say we've got too many. It's like anything, we've got to get the people and the right people into that position. We did some work as well about the first contact, about the phone call, what happens at that stage, what happens afterwards, when meetings are set up and everything else, try and do it. I know a lot of work was done around engagement in communities, football, rugby. There was a lot of work done with families attending sporting events, getting them involved. So I do appreciate more needs to be done, but I do understand that a lot has happened. I think we've come a long way from where we didn't have a dedicated person on the phone, so you phone up and it gets referred, and then that person, you've lost somebody potentially. So, yeah. Councillor Kendrick.
I think perhaps the impression Councillor Holmes has got is that children out of area are placed with other councils. My experience from foster panel is that when there isn't sufficiency within Kirklees, it's very often with a private foster carer from an agency externally, not another council that has capacity. Oh, yeah, and I agree, nobody feels that's the best deal, but it isn't that other councils have vacant foster carers waiting for our children, because they don't.
You talked through your overview presentation of the document about the voice of children and young people in this report. Could you just talk me through what process of co-production you went through to develop the voice of young people within this? Because when I read it, it didn't smack me in the face.
Yeah, we, in terms of feedback from young people, I mean, all young people in care have reviews, so we get feedback from reviewing officers from those teams. But we also went and spoke with the children's rights team about issues they have raised, and then we met with a group of care leavers and a group of younger people as well in care to get their views. I think that reviewing officers are robust in terms of that placement choice and, you know, finding the right placement for the child. And certainly the messages we got back from children and young people were fairly robust as well, about having more choice, having more local choice.
So what I'm looking for is some assurance that what young people are telling you is a reflection of what your strategy is based on. Is that correct?
Yeah, young people, I'll give you an example. Young people in our internal residential homes expressed a strong view that the occupancy of those homes should be 4, not 6 young people. And we currently, our children's homes are operating as a maximum of 4 young people, our mainstream children's homes.
May. I also was looking at your action plan, and sort of one of the first ones is a proportion of complainants satisfied with the outcome of the complaint. It's targeting around 50%. Can you just explain the rationale behind that and whether it's proportionate to other local authorities as well?
My experience of young people who complain is some young people will be partially satisfied with the response. Some of the complaints can be quite complex around family contact, some of the things that we don't have 100% say over. So, I mean, in terms of when I've worked elsewhere, my general sense of things has been that you will have some young people, a significant number of young people who are happy with the outcome of complaint and some who are partially. I mean, maybe if we'd clarified that more, there will be some who are partially happy with what the response has been, but not always totally. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. But my point was the justification for a 50% target, which with my background seems a little bit low, and I just wondered how you compared with other areas.
Yeah, couldn't respond to that question, you know, unequivocally now, without having the information from other areas, similar authorities, statistical neighbours at my fingertips. So
Where did the 50% come from?
it came from research, documents, etc., documents we've come across within the local authority. I mean, this document has been compiled based on research, national information and information within Kirklees. Yeah.
Thank you. Just to go through one of the points that you raised about listening to young people and the voice. When we had the visit to the children's home, which was really beneficial for everybody to be able to meet some young people, meet the staff in that informal way, they spoke about capacity and the size and reducing numbers, and that was something that we were keen on as a panel to feed back and say this is something that should be looked at. So I think that's a really positive move to make them smaller so that the issues can be contained and it's done in a way like that. And also looking at other capacity in the authority for empty houses, working with K&H to make the homes more home-like and make it more like a home and not just a place which doesn't seem that way. So like a house on the street as opposed to that's a children's home. So it takes away the stigma and everything that's associated with that. Councillor Bellamy next, please.
Thank you. I think you've just covered my point, actually, Councillor Burke. I was just going to mention that when we visited the homes, that when we discussed sort of smaller premises rather than the 6 beds and looking at sort of 2 beds, and I was just going to see if we'd made any further progress on that, and if there was, could we have some sort of update? The other thing I was going to mention was the fact that it had been mentioned that spoken to care leavers, and care leavers had mentioned that they'd spoken about being, when they'd left children's homes, etc., that they wanted to live in areas that were a lot more sort of sustainable and better areas. We'd also heard that at improvement boards. Yeah, and I believe it had come up at corporate parenting as well. So I'm pleased that you took you know, you'd taken that on board. But has there been any further development on smaller children homes at all?
Yeah, we attend a group, the Specialist Accommodation Board, which since joining the authority in late January, I think I've been to 3, and that's now, the pace of that is now increasing, where there's people from housing, etc. And that's looking at specialist accommodation, not just for children in care, but also for vulnerable adults and the elderly. And the discussion we've had there around the development and the acquisition of small properties to develop small registered children's homes, because there are 2 strands. One strand is around those small sites for children's homes for 2-3 bed. The other strand is semi-independent accommodation, which is not registered with Ofsted for preparation for care leavers, etc. So we've had them discussions as well. And them discussions are moving on. People are listening to us in terms of developments that are taking place within the district. Colleagues, Director of Housing, all of that has been noted. We did not want to wait, having listened to the strong views of our young people, until we acquired fresh properties for our mainstream provision to reduce the numbers. So we have reduced the numbers already. So in our mainstream provision, them numbers have already been reduced. And I think it's worthwhile saying as well, in recent weeks now, mainstream provision, we've had some very positive Ofsted inspections, unannounced 2-day Ofsted inspections in our mainstream provision in recent weeks.
Is that okay? Yeah. Councillor O'Donovan?
Thanks, Chair. I think for me at the moment it's important just to reflect that this is arguably the most important thing that this council does for me. And as long as we have that in sight, I've got some confidence. And I hope that through budgets this is something that we continue to protect as much as possible. I think it's important to reflect that it's valuable and shouldn't be taken for granted that this is here in the first place, and it's here at all. Some parts of the world this wouldn't be here, and we wouldn't get this opportunity to do this kind of thing with this kind of topic, so I think that's important to reflect on. My question is about the age range of young people and children. Are we taking this, because I'm new to children's scrutiny, is this from birth upwards? Is that... Yeah, there's no other department that take... Right, okay. So what, and forgive me if I've missed it, what is our ability and what is the work that we do with babies taken into care? Because that presents a whole host of different challenges from birth to maybe 18 months than, beyond 18 months would do. It needs a particular kind of care, doesn't it, and a particular kind of person. I just wondered what resource we have to protect that group.
In terms of babies coming into care, some of our work with these children, with babies, starts pre-birth, in terms of pre-birth assessments, etc. We, in the first instance, are trying to work, with parents, to support parents, for children to be cared for within their birth family. If that's not possible, we would look at extended family, for things like special guardianship, connected persons fostering, and we have a whole set of numbers around that, around how many special guardianships we do in terms of connected persons fostering, and we support that as a local authority. We have a team of staff who specifically support connected persons. So first of all, it's that thing around trying to support the birth family, and if possible, trying to ensure the child can remain within that family or within the extended family. There are some children where we obtain a care order, where that plan will move on to a plan of adoption. How successful that plan of adoption will be will depend on the profile of the child in a whole range of areas, in terms of trying to find a prospective adopter, for a child with complex disabilities, for example, can be a challenge. Yeah? So with the adoption, we work with One Adoption West Yorkshire, because that's a sub-regional approach now. So colleagues within Kirklees work closely with One Adoption West Yorkshire. We will try everything to get a permanent plan for those children. There will be some children, and there always is in every authority, who, despite the best efforts, we still end up in a fostering situation, and then we will try to get permanence via fostering, if we can, so to make long-term fostering matches and placements. There's a whole set of information around each of those strands, but yeah, we take that responsibility for those very young children who come into our care. It's a really important piece of work that we do.
And I suppose, do you get confidence, to give us confidence almost, that health visitors and birth centres and hospitals are working with you, not just with the parents that may be already sort of vulnerable or on a radar somewhere, but the parents that are on a radar, that give birth, and health visitors and obstetricians, etc., are coming across these parents like brand new, and are we confident that that link is solid between those three partners?
There is a refresh of the early help strategy within Kirklees. I think there is some really good work. I mean, in my relatively short time in the authority, I've seen some very, very good work, and then there's sometimes cases you come across where you think, could we have done things differently? Could we do more? But there are a lot of good people and a lot of committed people across this district to protect and keep safe our children and young people of all ages. Can we do more? We can always do more, because all of these situations dynamic, fast-moving. There's always lots of change. But certainly there are lots of good practice, but there is a refresh of the early help strategy, and there's lots going on in that arena, which is a slightly, I appreciate the reason for the question, it's a slightly sort of slightly separate discussion to this one in terms of what's going on, pre-entry into care and things like that.
Did you want to come back in? Yes. Yeah. Do you want to just ask that? Thank you. No, I agree with you. And we have looked at this before, I think, in the self-evaluation form as well, looking at the total numbers of young people that are looked after and how that number changes. Because I think, so on page 3, it says that the number has increased from 312 to 656, but I think it's a higher number now, is that correct?
The number of children in our care Friday afternoon was 661 overall.
Okay. If you just, what I would be interested in, if we do have this information, to be able to provide that to the panel, and I think with some context around, because in the past when I've asked this question, especially about those young people who are cared outside of the authority, and previously we've been told there's a reason for that, and obviously some people need to, but that used to be more of what I used to think was a get-out clause, when in fact we should be doing an awful lot more to try and keep them in if we can. But I understand that that's now taking place. So I think just some context around the total numbers, how many are outside of the authority, and how many of those should be within the authority if we could do something about it, and what we're going to do to try and achieve that.
I think the current number, more than 20 miles outside of our boundary, which is a sort of Ofsted measure of children placed at a distance. The week before last, I think it was 112 placed more than 20 miles outside of our boundary for a variety of reasons. Some of them because they may be placed, as the question earlier on about being placed with kinship, that if grandmother lives in Southampton and the child comes into care and we make a connected persons for that reason. There are certainly one or two unaccompanied asylum-seeking children who came to our care, who we've then placed near to family members in other parts of the country. But there are a group of children who are not in specialist accommodation also, who we believe we need capacity to care for within our district.
Can I just be sorry, just before you come in, we did receive some of this previously, which you wouldn't have been aware of, obviously. We received all the information about children who are looked after, children from minority ethnic groups, children whose first language is not English, the percentages with the health and education care plan, so we can provide all of that we've had previously.
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate what you said, Chair, that at the previous meeting we brought very specific detail which has been requested, which we felt would have been repeating what we'd already brought.
Any other further questions or comments? Yeah.
I appreciate that you bring documentation to previous scrutiny meetings, but I think with documentation like this, it's helpful to provide context of the children of which we're looking at and who we're trying to improve their lives for. So even some high-level stuff would be welcome. I support my colleagues over here's request for that kind of information, because in the space of a few months of times that can fluctuate. It's also to provide assurance on the approaches that you're doing to address those inequalities, and assurance that actually you are hitting them and addressing them and improving outcomes for local young people. So I get where you're coming from, but actually I think it's helpful from my perspective for that assurance to get that. Going back to the numbers debate and looking at your action plan, I'm sorry, I am going to be a bit pernickety about this, but for me, as a co-optee, to have assurance that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing would be helpful to have some context as to what targets you've got and why you've got those targets. So there's a lot of question marks in your table, and I appreciate that, you know, sometimes you can't complete everything. But in my other day job, if I had a table like this in front of me, I would be asking some really hard questions about why those gaps are there and what you're doing and how soon you will do it to fill those gaps.
Yeah, I accept, and this is a draft document. It's a working document that we're still doing things on. We brought it to scrutiny to involve scrutiny in the development of it as well. So it's not the finished article. So I would like to reiterate that as well. That it's brought for this sort of discussion as well, which will be helpful as we move forward, I think.
Sorry, so just to be clear, you're asking us to support the targets that you're looking for, and then you'll populate it with the data afterwards. Is that what you're wanting from us?
We're asking you to support the broad principles of this sufficiency strategy, and the comments you're making about how we would monitor moving forward, the sort of data we will incorporate in the document as we're moving it forward. So part of this was to involve you rather than produce a finished document and then to say, well, it's not got this in, it's not got that in. So part of what we're hearing is what we'll incorporate in the document.
Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you, Chair. I absolutely support Councillor Holmes' stance and the people's in terms of for scrutiny to really be satisfied that they need to have regular updates that answer the question, so what? There's this action plan, so what? And I think going forward that should be something that comes regularly to scrutiny. What I would also ask members of scrutiny panel to do is, on reflection over time, you may want to do a little bit more work, but if you would have comments or suggestions, further suggestions, that you would like to send to Steve and or me perhaps, we will make sure those are taken into account. It is very much a draft document, and it is about saying, rather than coming with something that was set in place by the service, it's about help us by contributing to it, challenging it. But I do think some regular statistical information should come to the panel that answers the question, so what? All these actions, so what difference has it made?
I'll just bring Sal in a second, just to go through that as well before what we've done. We have come a long way from having been given finished reports and not had the opportunity to contribute and comment on it. And I think it's really important, and I'm pleased that this is now happening, whereas it didn't really happen as much as it should have in the past. Been given the early opportunities to be able to comment and be able to be critical where we need to on the reports.
Yeah, just to reiterate some of those points really about the fact that we've had quite a bit of information from you already this morning that we can fit into this strategy. I think the idea about this strategy specifically is that we have a number of children who are in our care. That number's around 670 at the moment, and it has gone up faster than the rate of children being in care has gone up nationally. So there is something for us to understand about how and why that has happened. And part of the sufficiency strategy is about having enough placements, but we don't want to just follow the numbers, so that if there's an increase in the number of children in care, we just keep trying to find more and more placements, because there is a national shortage of placements. There aren't local authorities that have got placements available to share with each other. What happens is when a local authority uses all of its in-house capacity, is we tend to go to private providers to seek placements. And while Steve's explained that some of those might be for good reason, quite a lot of the time it is about capacity. So we have to work on it in two ways. One is actually, is that 670 or so, is that the right sort of number for a place like Kirklees in terms of children who need to be in care? We would contend that probably not. We probably think that it is higher than we would want it to be. And so we have to get all of the things in place that are going to prevent the need for children to come into care. And that will be things like our early help strategy, are all the preventative things that we've got in place appropriate? Have we got good edge of care services? Are we maximising the use of family placements so that children can remain within their extended family wherever possible? And once those things are in place, then you should have a more realistic number of children and young people that you are dealing with. And then the other side becomes provision. Yeah. So we've talked a bit about, we want, given that children and young people are telling us this, we want children's homes to be smaller, so that there are a maximum number of 4 children, and we're working with partners and colleagues in the council to identify what that looks like. We do want to increase the number of foster carers that we've got, because where children can't live within their own families, we want to provide an alternative placement within a family. So we will do all of the things that we need to do around advertising, around recruitment and assessment of foster carers in the most efficient way. So we are working through all of that detail. It's not, I think, it's not that we're not doing those other things that will attract people to want to foster for Kirklees, but word of mouth has been known to be the biggest recruiter of foster carers up and down the country, because as Steve explained early on, if you've got a really good quality offer and support to foster carers, they talk to their friends about it, and that is the way that you will introduce more and more people to Kirklees, and so that will be part of how we develop sufficiency in terms of children's placements.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
You said that you were looking at why we had more children in care, coming into care. This also bothered me, so I did a little bit of research, which might be useful or not, I don't know. But in 2009, there was research done for the Department of Children's Schools and Families, which looked at disproportionality in child welfare, whereby between the ages of 0 and 10, certain ethnic groups were more likely to be taken into care than their proportion in the population would suggest. I wonder whether or not that piece of research might throw any light on the current problems in this area.
I think what we find nationally in terms of ethnicity is that mixed race children are seen disproportionately in higher numbers in the care system, and so the analysis that we'll undertake around specifically the population in Kirklees will help us to look into that. I think that I don't think that the increase is simply down to a disproportionality of a particular ethnic group. I think that many of the issues here will be to do with what I described earlier in terms of the whole system. Have we got the whole system in balance, and are we providing children, young people and their families with the right support at the right time? Because if we start to get that part of the system right, then we will effectively meet children's needs earlier in the life of the problem, when those problems are smaller and easier to resolve. And then what you're left with are those children with the greatest level of need. And if we've got good quality services for those children, young people and families, then we'll be successful in avoiding those children needing to come into care, so that you are left with a more realistic number of children who really do need to be in care. And then what we've got with this efficiency strategy is the ability to provide them with good quality services, because one of the downfalls of not getting the rest of that system right is you have a disproportionately high number of children in care. It's very difficult to have placement choice in those circumstances, and so that leads to what Councillor Holmes described in terms of multiple placements, because we're not able to get the match right. So getting the down to those children that really need to be in care helps, not only in the sense that we've met children and young people's needs as we should have. It also means for those who do need to be in care, we're able to provide a much better, higher quality service that is much more geared towards their needs, and so they achieve permanence either through adoption, fostering, return to their family, or through special guardianship.
Another part of the strategy is the importance of education. And on page 12, you say, we will strengthen our relationship with both mainstream and specialist education providers. How?
that is through the work we do with the virtual school. And I think, once again, that whole system about how we respond, how we have the ongoing conversation with educational providers. I mean, within schools, you've got designated teachers for children in care, yeah? So it's how we provide training, etc., for people such as that, taking on that role. But the work of the virtual school for children in care is really important, because that virtual school that has has staff, and it's monitoring the progress, the attainment, and the issues and things that are occurring for children in our care. So it's about how we have that effective relationship in terms of that virtual school has a governing body, and we're doing lots of work there. It really is about putting in the work when issues occur, but also making sure we have a very effective virtual school for our children in care.
Any further questions or comments from panel members?
So on page 12 or page 24, whichever one you're using, the accommodating young people leaving custody. How many young people do we have leaving custody every year who we're supporting through young offenders?
I would need to get that data for you. I can forward that number to you from the youth offending team. I haven't got it off the top of my head.
On page 18, you say you will create a quality assurance officer role within the placements team. Is that going to be an internal appointment?
We are looking at the roles and responsibilities within the placement team and how we have those roles configured. What we're interested in having is a post holder who is building relationships with those private providers and going out and seeing what's going on, so both with private sector fostering and residential. We've already have a regular meeting with private sector residential, but it's going to be more of what those current post holders do, of how we configure those current posts.
Okay, and secondly, you're talking about developing a resource panel to have oversight over all placements. How are you going to ensure that this panel will not actually slow down placements?
About 8 weeks ago, we started this panel, meets once a week, and this is for externally placed children and young people. It's multi-agency, including reps from education and health, and that panel is in place, and systematically we are the young people and children who were placed in external provision. We're reviewing those cases on a systematic basis, and where there's issues arise, then them cases are being brought forward earlier. So, and in terms of every fourth panel, we call in that now an enhanced resource panel to look at the most complex cases where we have representation from the CCG, etc. So we've already put that panel in place.
My concern is we've heard in the past of things being slowed down unnecessarily, which is what I was. Does this panel actually speed up the process?
The panel reviews cases that are already placed. So what it does is provides oversight, quality assurance about what's going on. So example would be a child who was placed in specialist provision in Birmingham. We would ask the social worker for a view of what's going on for that child, and then we would ask a series of questions around, are we getting as a local authority what we're expecting to get from that placement provider, so it doesn't slow down because the child is already in placement. This is us reviewing children who were placed outside of council provision.
No pressure then, final one. Just going back to the report, I think the principles that you've got to underpin your strategy are on message, and I fully support them. I think the objectives that you've got within your action plan are the areas that I would look for assurance to ensure that you're meeting the things that you've said, your principles within the strategy. My only concern, and you've already provided me assurance that you're on it, would be to see the data of what you're looking for, by when, and when you'd bring it to me. So from my perspective, I think it is a good document, apart from the areas that I've highlighted.
Okay, thank you for your contributions. Any information that's been requested will be sent on to members afterwards, any additional information around numbers and that. Item 6 is the work programme. Many of the items on here, I think all of the items, are a continuation of the work that's been taking place already and has taken place, and you will see them listed there. The improvement journey, elective home education is the ongoing ad hoc panel, and then we've got special education needs and disability, CSE and safeguarding, safeguarding board, the children's plan, the visit to the duty and advice, front door policy, staff engagement and edge of care. So when we spoke previously about taking on the extra work, all the work that we do is important and everything that we do, but it's about having capacity and the time to be able to contribute meaningfully to the different issues that we have. So Sal, do you want to go through the issues that are on the work programme, and if you'd like to comment on where we are and how maybe we can progress with them?
Okay, would it be helpful, Chair, for me just to do a little bit of background in terms of where we are overall in children's services? I mean, people will be aware that in October 2016, Ofsted visited Kirklees Children's Services and deemed its services to be inadequate. There were 27 recommendations that came from that report, and clearly what was being said by Ofsted at the time is that children in Kirklees were not being kept safe. And there were a number of arrangements for trying to lead the service out of that situation over the following months, and a number of changes in leadership. There was also a commissioner appointed, Eleanor Brazil, by the Department for Education to ensure that Kirklees made progress. She wasn't satisfied that that progress was being made effectively enough, and suggested a partnership with Leeds City Council, and that partnership between Kirklees and Leeds began in earnest in July 2017, and meant that there was a Director of Children's Services, Steve Walker, who will be Director for Leeds and for Kirklees, and Steve and I have been working closely together to cover those directorate responsibilities since then. Probably 3 or 4 months into those arrangements, Steve and I had been sharing the responsibilities kind of half and half. We felt that it needed more focus than that, and so we've agreed that I will spend the majority of my working week in Kirklees, and that's been in place since around October last year. We continue to be visited by Ofsted around every 3 months or so, and each time they come for 2 days to undertake a monitoring visit, normally around a specific area of the service or a specific area of practice. Their last visit to us was in July. We reported back here that after each monitoring visit there's a letter that's published. We reported back on the findings of that monitoring visit. I think to summarise in terms of where I think we'd got to with Ofsted at that point was that they think that we are making progress. They think that we have a realistic understanding of the areas of concern, the areas that we still need to improve on. There were a significant number of positives, but still a whole host of areas for development as well. But we are in agreement about what those areas of development look like. So whilst there is good progress, there is still a long way to go. One of the things that we have made a lot of progress in is establishing permanent leadership teams on both sides of the directorates, on the learning side and on the child protection and family support side. We have permanent service directors who are behind me, and both of their teams now have permanent heads of service. In most posts we've got 1 or 2 vacancies. We've also been recruiting significantly frontline staff, so recently we recruited 27 newly qualified social workers, but also 14 advanced practitioners who are more experienced social workers who work on the front line. So whilst we've got 27 newly qualified social workers, the 14 advanced practitioners are there to support, mentor, co-work alongside those social workers, so that they have a positive experience and want to remain in Kirklees. So I just thought that that might be helpful in terms of trying to give you a little bit of backdrop to where we are on that journey. The improvement board that's chaired by Eleanor Brazil does meet on a monthly basis, and we report progress into there. There's a great deal of detail that sits behind all of the actions, but we have simplified some of our approach to the improvement by setting out a 10-point improvement plan. And again, that was part of Scrutiny's business to have a look at that last year. Over the coming months, we will be refreshing that 10-point improvement plan because we've made progress against quite a number of areas in it, but also we understand some of the issues more effectively now. So in terms of the work programme, we've got the improvement journey as the first item, and we will bring regular reports following any Ofsted monitoring visits that take place. So the next monitoring visits that we have in place are in July. So we will come, once that's been published, we'll come back here with a report for you about what progress we're making. I think I might have said the last monitoring visit was in July earlier. That was wrong. I meant it was in March. I'm getting the one that we've had with the one that we've got coming up mixed up there. Sorry about that. So we'll bring regular reports following those. Elective home education, we've again has been to scrutiny, but there are further plans, further reports to come. So we will bring those through to scrutiny. It is an important local issue. It's a regional and national issue at the moment. So we'll bring further reports on that. Special education needs and disabilities. We have undertaken a self-evaluation, which again has we've been reporting to scrutiny. That report is scheduled to come in the near future, and we think that using that self-evaluation as a guide, we can probably yourselves can pick out a couple of areas that we want to focus on in this area rather than trying to do the whole thing. There might be 2 areas that you want to pick out that we can look at in a bit more detail. CSE, we would like to bring that as to give you an update on what the current service looks like, how we are working with our partners around CSE, and what the partnership work around CSE looks like. That's a significant piece of work to come. Safeguarding board, as per usual, we'll bring the annual report and can have a session here around the work of the safeguarding board. The Children and Young People's Plan, we hope to bring this in autumn as we are reviewing as I said earlier, we're doing a refresh of the 10-point improvement plan, and I think those 2 things need to fit in strongly together. But we can bring the Children and Young People's Plan, which will set out the overarching plan for children and young people in Kirklees, but there will be a number of strategies that fall out of that, and I'll suggest at least one of those for scrutiny to look at when I get to the end of this list. 7 and 8 we think we can pull together. so that we can tell you about the work that we've been doing around the front door. I think it's an important area to be scrutinised, given that it is the interface between children's social work and early help and our partners. So we'll bring some reports to tell you what the service looks like and how it operates, but also build into that a visit to the duty and advice team for a number of members as well. We've got staff engagement visit there. I think we'll. There are some areas where we think visits to staff by scrutiny would be important. So I've highlighted one of those, which is the front door one, but there are others that I will mention in a second. And then, in addition to, then you've got there at number 10. You've got edge of care provision, and we are developing a number of edge of care services, so multi-systemic therapy, the family mental health service and family group conferencing, and I think it will be really helpful for us to share what those services are about with you and have that scrutinised, because those services, some parts of those services are funded for 12 months through the support that we're getting from the Department for Education, and I think it'll be important for scrutinies to give us a view about what we need to do what we need to do with those services in the future, whether they are effective and helpful. In addition to that, I think we thought three other things really. One is that we are developing with partners an early help strategy, and we'd like to bring that here for scrutiny to have an oversight of, and that's important in the context of what I was describing as the whole system being in balance. We think that young people's educational outcomes from across the district would be an important area for scrutiny to look at and work with us on. And one other area that we identified was the children with disability service that sits within social care. We thought that would be something useful for scrutiny to look at.
Thank you. Any comments or any questions from panel members regarding the work programme? So we'll try, and when we move on to the next item, is future meetings, is to arrange the meetings around the timings of reports and Ofsted visits so that we can work more effectively. Okay, thank you for that, Sam. Item 7 is future meeting dates. As I said, we're going to try and work around what's taking place already so we can tie in with that. If members have any specific requests, if you could email Landy with any comments or concerns about availability, and then we'll do our best to work around that. Okay? Yeah, we'll do our best where we can. Yep. Okay, so that's the end of the formal agenda. We're moving on to the informal